BC, realistically, not so much because they've done great work, but there's also like a little bit of a gap in terms of what's happening at featherweight. As we know, UFC 276 is going to be the trilogy between Max and Volkanovski. We have a whole thing coming out about that. But I wonder, in your mind, does Kattar versus Emmett scream title contender to you? And the reason why I'm a little bit hedging it is because they both had some pretty significant losses that were not too long ago, including the Kattar one with Max, which was a historic beating. And also, what if Max wins? Are they going to do Max Kattar too? How do you assess the stakes in this one?
I mean, the stakes are high. How you want to individually assess them depends on how you're looking at sort of the top, 5 to 7 of the rankings. And let's remind you, in terms of who's fighting in this matchup, you do have number 4, Calvin Kattar, against number 7, Josh Emmett. Luke, I don't want to discount what a win could do for Kattar because he could have done nothing better than what he did. Bounce back from that Max Holloway loss and score an absolutely great comeback win and show how hungry he is and how much he's still right here despite that damaging loss. So yes, a win for Kattar is huge. But correct me if I'm wrong here, Luke, but I'm looking at this even as a bigger opportunity for Emmett, who we know the window being, 35, is getting smaller, yet he's won 4 in a row. He bounced back from that nearly 2-year layoff coming off of the damage he took in outlasting Shane Burgos, and he put together a very nice victory over Dan Ige to continue that momentum. If he beats number 4, Calvin Kattar, I do think we're talking about this man with arguably the best overall tattoo game in this sport, filled with awful tattoos, but obviously the chin, the punching, the wrestling, the stamina. I'm wondering if he has an opportunity here to really make a leap. Would you agree with me, Luke, that one has a slightly more higher potential upside of what they can spin this entering this fight, or am I just a little bit off based on maybe potentially the chemicals dumped in the water in the river that I grew up in and possibly some other factors that play?
Well, you tell me, because here I'm going to read you their last 5 fights, and you tell me which one has more to gain here based on where they've been. So if you look at Josh Emmett, he has a loss to Jeremy Stephens, which was a really bad one because of the damage that it did. But then he rebounded against Johnson, then Amirsad Bektic, then Shane Burgos, and then more recently Dan Ige. Conversely, if you look at the 5 for Calvin Kattar, there's the loss to Magomed Sharapov, which I think we would both agree is somewhat controversial, but it was a fair win, but it was an interesting change of affairs there in the third.
No, I mean, dude, hold on. He came on in the third. Anyone that wants to say, hey, if that was 5 rounds, okay, that's fine. Hey, if your uncle didn't have that piece on him, he'd be your aunt. Okay, cool. But it was a 3-round fight, and Zabit won it. And Zabit's also the best featherweight in the world. What else you want from me, Luke?
Is he? Is that what he is? All right, then he beats Jeremy Stephens, then he beats Dan Ige, then he had that historic, that's what it was, the loss to Holloway, but he rebounded against Giga Chikadze, and I really wonder, is that Chikadze win the best of the 2 wins, frankly, that either of them might have? It actually might be. I think he's gotten a little bit higher. The rankings speak to that. I do think Emmett has certainly a less of a timetable to make this work, and also I would agree. I think this would be a huge, huge win for him. Now, to answer the original question about the stakes, you still have Ortega and Rodriguez coming down the pike, so that seems to me like the much more likely of the 2 to get the title shot, especially if it's Yair. But I think Emmett could cause a lot of disruptions here. If Volkanovski wins, that Kattar would be a fresh matchup. They would be, in the on-deck circle or something like that. They wouldn't be next up to bat. I
do like when there's a scenario, and you're right, that matchup, Ortega, are they closer to getting that title shot with a win, especially looking great? More likely than not, yes. But, Luke, they are both coming off a loss, Yair and Ortega, and I do like when the UFC sort of says, look, we have multiple fights coming up involving guys in the top 5 to 7 or 8 or whatever. Really, whoever comes through and puts forth the dominant performance could open the door and the path for them to get a shot. And I kind of like sometimes when it's a little bit more ambiguous and open, almost like who wants it, right? Who's coming after it? So I think that's got to be in the back of the mind for both of these gentlemen, that a big win here. And yes, I don't want to discount how big that how big that win over Chikadze, Giga Chikadze. Let me recover from that stroke I just had on air, Luke. I don't want to discount how great that win was. It was fantastic. So you're right. I do think, though, you could crash the party with a big performance. The stakes are high. This is a great main event. The attention will be here. We love this freaking division. Damn, Luke. I think that we're going to see a very manly 5-round main event on Saturday, and I think it's going to get hairy in there, bro.
Also, to be clear, Josh Emmett is 37. Now, he turned 37 in March, so he's not like,
Oh, I said 35. Is he really 37?
Well, remember, he missed a bunch of time after losing to Jeremy Stevens, so that fight was in 2018. He didn't come back till over a year later. He fought twice in 2019, won both of those, fought again in 2020, won that, and then fought again against Dan Ige. By the way, the fights against Burgos and Bektic were both either fight of the night or performance of the night bonuses. Yeah. So he's had a big rebound. In fact, if he wins this weekend, that's 5 featherweight wins in a row. And I think not all 5. He KO'd Michael Johnson and he TKO'd Bektic. But the last 3 would be over ranked opponents. And then this one would be inside the top 5. There'd be a clear escalation. I believe that's right. There'd be a clear escalation, yes, of his development. So, yes, I think Josh Emmett certainly has no room for error. I mean, think about it realistically. If you're 37 and you lose here to Kattar, and let's say you lose fairly, right, like the other guy was just better on that night, that would probably dash any title hopes short of like a short notice, oh, we need you on a moment's notice. Could you help? Yes, he'd be relevant in that sense. But it's really, it's a bit of do or die for Josh Emmett this weekend. Fair?
Very fair, very fair. And the age update certainly does that, as does Luke, as you mentioned. Look, I mean, this guy's had 2 legitimately long and arduous recoveries, one from that brutal knockout loss to Stevens that you mentioned. But, Luke, that thriller against Shane Burgos can't be forgotten because of what it did to both of them. Both were willing on that night to come out and say, look, I think I'm a next title contender. I'll do whatever it takes to get past this step. We may need to see some of that same spirit and that chutzpah coming out of Josh Emmett once more, because this division, as you know, is full of hammers. And this guy, you could argue, Luke, on this 4-fight win streak in the recovery from that Stevens knockout, has taken the longest possible road to get there. No disrespect, obviously, to how well Kattar recovered from the damage in that Max Holloway loss. Both are battle-tested, but both had to crawl through some shit to get to this point. For both of these guys, I'd love to see them come through with a spectacular performance and be in that discussion, because these are 2 blue-collar members of this division, and I think both have really, through highs and lows, have shown you that. I don't know who has the edge. I love the style contrast. I love the toughness of both. Luke, this is appointment viewing. This is why we go, this is why we do this shit. I can't wait for this main event. Give me any reason not to like it. You can't.
Also, one thing that sort of shows up on tape, and then if you look at the win-losses, you can kind of see it there a little bit, but like Richard Mann had something that was just really, really smart about this. If you look at how many knockdowns Josh Emmett scores, he ranks 9th among active UFC fighters, right? But 6 of those and the 8 ahead of him are all heavyweights. So the only 2 non-heavyweights ahead of him are Conor McGregor and Sean O'Malley. Dude, fucking Josh Emmett can thump. He is a very, very heavy-handed guy. The stats speak to that. And in fact, listen to this little thing. I just thought this was fun. I mean, I didn't even realize this until you sort of pointed out. Listen to this. He has scored, talk about Josh Emmett, has scored knockdowns in 7 straight fights and has landed 4 knockdowns against Felipe Aranches, which is tied for the second most ever landed in a UFC fight. The only 2 times it was more was when Jeremy Stevens was kicking Gilbert Melendez and he kept falling. And then Forrest Petz when he beat Sam Morgan, which I watched that fight. He was hitting Sam Morgan so hard his ears were wiggling in slow motion. Joe Rogan made a comment about it. I thought he was going to make Sam Morgan mow his lawn. It was such a beating. Other than that, dude, Josh Emmett is the guy out there putting fucking hands on people. So it's not just you have 2 good fighters. You've got a guy in Josh Emmett who is a fight-ending threat. And then you take a look at what Kattar did to Stevens. He's hardly some slouch in that department himself. Pretty interesting fight, pretty action-oriented fight if I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and they're both gritty, and there's so much reason with the stakes to have to fight another absolute war. I mean, I don't see this being dominant on one side, Luke, as much as there is that potential if someone could break through with a kind of, stoppage type win that you're like, damn, I feel like we're headed through 5 crazy, arduous, intense, damage heavy rounds. And these are two men that are up to the task.